Johnny Sports Network here to provide you with my Week 18 NFL predictions. And Week 18 means it's the season finale of the NFL regular season. Last week, 14-2 overall in the season, 174 and 82. And before I get to the Week 18 predictions, I want to address that this week is going to be a little different. I'm not going to predict the games in order. I'm going to start with the games that don't have any playoff implications, whether it be between two teams already eliminated from contention, teams that are not going to be affected by the results of this week based off of seeding. I just wanted to do something different for the final week because I didn't want to spend too much time with games that aren't going to mean as much as the other games, as the games that I predict first this week are going to be games that aren't going to affect the playoffs, but affect draft positioning for April's NFL draft. Without further ado, let's get right into the Week 18 NFL predictions. Starting things off with the Jaguars and Colts, both teams eliminated from playoff contention. The Jaguars, they have shown some valiant efforts this season, but only have 4 wins to show for it, while the Colts, they were upset by the Giants last week, ending their playoff hopes. And going into it, they once again made a switch at quarterback. Anthony Richardson was once again placed on the bench, and Joe Flacco was the starter for that game. But I think the Colts win this week no matter who starts at quarterback, whether if it's Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco. I think the Colts do get the win. As far as the Jaguars are concerned, I do think that Doug Peterson is going to be let go on the Monday following the game. I think he will be one of the head coaches that does get let go on Black Monday. 49ers and Cardinals, another game where both teams are eliminated from playoff contention. The 49ers has been a really disappointing season. Granted, they were riddled with injuries. And last week on Monday Night Football, Brock Purdy, he was injured at the end of the game. Josh Dobbs had to come in for him. While the Cardinals, they've been a team that I have found unpredictable the entire season. And this is a game where I have to pick somebody to win. And if I get this game wrong, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, because this is a game between two teams that are already eliminated from the playoffs. I'm going to pick the Cardinals because the 49ers, I do feel like they are going to play their backups, because you don't want to have any major injuries at the end of the season when you've already been riddled with injuries. At least make sure everybody's healthy going into 2025. I'm going to pick the Cardinals. Bills and Patriots. The Bills will be the 2 seed in the AFC no matter what happens this week. The Patriots, they are looking to respond after the performance last week against the Chargers, where boos were heard all throughout the stadium in that game this past Saturday. And there are multiple questions to this game. For the Bills, how long will the starters play in this game? As Josh Allen, he did make a statement where he said that what he cares about is his starting streak. I anticipate that Josh Allen at the most will probably play 1 possession in this game. The Patriots, they do control their own destiny for the number 1 pick in April's NFL draft. Do the Patriots feel like not winning this game to solidify the number 1 overall pick? Or do they look to get this win and solidify some momentum going into the off season? And I really think that it is going to be the Patriots looking to salvage some momentum going into the offseason. I think the Bills starters at the most play only 1 possession in this game. And I think the Patriots, they do get the win. Giants and Eagles. The Giants, they spoiled the Colts season last week, ending their playoff hopes in an upset victory. The Eagles will be the 2 seed in the NFC no matter what happens this week. But the big storyline going into this game, Saquon Barkley is 101 yards away from breaking Eric Dickerson's record for most rushing yards in a single season. And I think that Saquon Barkley is going to play in this game until he does break the record. I think the Eagles starters will play until Saquon Barkley breaks this record. I do think Jalen Hurts is going to sit out of this game. I think they will start Kenny Pickett. And I think they'll just hand the ball off constantly to Saquon Barkley until he gets the yards he needs to break that record. And I think this is going to remind me of a couple years ago when the Eagles, they decided to rest their starters for the final game against the Giants. And the Eagles, they won a closer game than what you would have expected on paper. I think the Eagles, they do win this matchup. And I think it is a close game because the Eagles will only play their starters until Saquon Barkley does get the yardage he needs for that record to be broken. Texans and Titans. The Texans, they will be the 4 seed in the AFC no matter what happens, while the Titans, currently in possession of the number 2 pick in April's NFL draft. And we don't have any word yet on whether or not the Texans will be playing their starters in this Week 18 matchup. I think the Texans are going to play their starters. And if I had to guess, I think the starters will play the first half of this game. As much as I am in support of teams resting their starters for their playoff run, the Texans, they need to establish some confidence going into the playoffs. When you consider the fact the Texans were shut out on Christmas Day against the Ravens, well, offensively, the Texans were shut out. You need to have some confidence going into the playoffs. You need C.J. Stroud to have some confidence going into the playoffs. I think the Texans starters, they do play at least the first half. But then after that, I think the starters will be rested. Which is why I'm picking the Titans to win this game. And we will see what happens as far as the draft order is concerned. By the Titans, they do win this matchup. Bengals and Steelers. The Bengals, they need to win this game to keep their playoff hopes intact going into the Sunday games. While the Steelers, with a win and a Ravens loss, the Steelers will clinch the AFC North. And I was back and forth on this matchup. At first, I thought the Steelers would win because they're at home in prime time, Saturday night. But then I look at how these two teams have been in these last 4 weeks or so. The Bengals, they are on a hot streak at this point. And if the Bengals, if one or two things go differently in a couple of their games, the Bengals, they're not in the situation they're in right now. They're not in must-win territory, and they need help as well. The last few games for the Steelers, the story has been they're in the game at halftime, but then in the second half, everything falls apart. But the Bengals' momentum in this last month or so, I think they use that momentum and they get the win against the Steelers to keep their playoff hopes intact going into Sunday's games. Browns and Ravens. The Browns upset the Ravens earlier in the season in Cleveland when Jameis Winston was the starting quarterback. And Jameis Winston, he provided some momentum the Browns really needed. But since Jameis Winston has been benched in favor of Dorian Thompson-Robinson, while the Ravens, with a win, they will clinch the AFC North. And the Ravens, they are an overwhelming favorite in this matchup, favored by nearly 18 points in this game. And the Browns, are clearly in tank mode. They are clearly tanking, and it's pretty obvious to see. I'm going to pick the Ravens to win this game convincingly, with everybody playing, with everybody knowing what's on the line for the Ravens in this game. They'll get the job done and avenge the loss they had against Cleveland earlier in the season in what is a trap game every year for the Ravens. They dominated home this time around. Chargers and Raiders. And this is another game this week that feels difficult to predict. Chargers in the playoffs. They're currently the 6th seed in the AFC. However, with a win and a Steelers loss on Saturday night, the Chargers will move up to the 5th seed in the AFC. And being the 5th seed in the AFC, I think that is very beneficial, as they would go on the road to take on a struggling Texans team, a Texans team that just got shut out offensively against the Ravens on Christmas Day. However, if the Steelers do win against the Bengals on Saturday night, I do think that the Chargers are, I'm about 99% sure they're going to rest their starters. I'm picking the Chargers to win this game, regardless of whether or not their starters play or not. If it's the Chargers backups playing in this game, then it feels like a game that's probably going to be your 17-13 kind of game for that week. Either way, I'm going to pick the Chargers. Bears and Packers. The Bears have now lost 10 in a row, while the Packers, they have clinched their playoff spot. However, right now they are the 7th seed in the NFC, which means they would go on the road to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. And if there is one place you don't want to go on the road in the playoffs, it's to Philadelphia. As we have seen in these past few years, Philadelphia in the playoffs is a very hostile environment, and that is a place where nobody wants to go to. The Packers will 100% be playing their starters from start to finish, and you'll take your chances in LA against the Rams or in Tampa Bay against the Buccaneers, but you don't want to go to Philadelphia. Packers starters will be in all game long. The Packers will win convincingly, and the Bears' losing streak will extend to 11. Commanders and Cowboys. The Commanders clinched their spot in the playoffs last week with an overtime thrilling victory over the Falcons. They're off an emotional victory, going on the road to take on a Cowboys team that is just simply looking to salvage something to take with them into the offseason. They were embarrassed last week by the Eagles, and CeeDee Lamb is out for the season. A Cowboys season has been very disappointing. Dak Prescott was injured earlier in the season. It was a rough start for the Cowboys season, and it just got worse as the season went along. And the Commanders, they'll be playing their starters from start to finish, just like the Packers are. The Packers, they're trying to get the 6th seed in the NFC, while the Commanders, they are trying to hold on to the 6th seed to avoid going to Philadelphia on the road for the wild card round. And I think the Commanders, they do get the job done, and they hold on to the 6th seed in the NFC. Panthers, Falcons. Who would have thought in the middle of October the Falcons would be in the position they're in right now, needing to win this week and hope the Saints can upset the Buccaneers on the road. The Falcons were in control of their own destiny going into last week, but the Falcons missing a field goal at the end of regulation to win the game and to continue to control their own destiny going to this week. And the Falcons, they had 2 timeouts in the final drive. Raheem Morris not calling a timeout, and it cost the Falcons about 2 or 3 plays to get more yardage to make an easier field goal, but instead they lose the coin toss in overtime. The Commanders march down the field and score a touchdown to win the game, and the Falcons, they are back to needing to win and need to get help. While the Panthers, they have played serious contenders very tough this season. The Falcons, they are very angry after the Commanders lost last week, and they're going to be really motivated in this one, knowing that they can still get in, but they need help. I'm going to pick the Falcons to close out the season with a win. Saints and Buccaneers. The Saints, they started the season 2-0, but then after that, things just went downhill for them really fast. While the Buccaneers, they took full advantage of the Falcons' losing streak, and once again, they're in a position to control their own destiny. They're favored by nearly 2 touchdowns in this game as of this moment. And with a win, the Buccaneers are in, as they will clinch the NFC South. And I think they get the job done. Because this Buccaneers team, they have been playing very great football in this past month or so. Despite a slight bump in the road against the Cowboys a couple weeks ago, I still think that this is a very sneaky team going into the playoffs. And I think they are a team that teams need to watch out for. As I just like the way they've been playing football in this past month or so, they get the win, they'll clinch their spot in the playoffs, eliminating the Falcons. Seahawks and Rams. And in my opinion, this is the toughest game to predict this week. And the reason why I say that is the Rams are currently the 3 seed in the NFC. If the Buccaneers win and the Rams lose, the Buccaneers will be the 3 seed in the NFC, while the Rams would be the 4 seed. And I'm bringing this up because I would not be surprised if the Rams consider playing chess instead of checkers this week. Because if the Rams lose and the Buccaneers win, the Rams, they fall to the 4 seed in the NFC, and they will host whoever loses between the Vikings and the Lions on Wildcard Weekend. We've seen them play against the Vikings and Lions this season. The Lions in week 1, the Rams, they took them to overtime. And on Thursday Night Football early in the season, we saw them defeat the Vikings. So I am questioning whether or not the Rams are considering doing this, as they had the Seahawks being favored by 3. I'm going to pick the Rams in this game, but we'll have to see what the Rams do on Sunday. I don't know if they're aware of what kind of scenario they're in, but I'll pick them to win this week, and we'll see how this plays out. Dolphins and Jets. Last week, the Dolphins kept their playoff hopes intact with a win on the road against the Browns. However, going into that game, we received news that Tua was not going to play in that game due to a hip injury, and his status going into this Week 18 matchup is in question. The Jets last week, they were getting shut out by the Bills, but then Tyrod Taylor came in, and the Jets scored a couple of touchdowns to make that game way close to what it really was. And a storyline going into this game, Aaron Rodgers just needs 1 touchdown pass to have 500 touchdown passes in his career. And it's unknown what the future holds for Aaron Rodgers. Will he return to the Jets in 2025? Will he be on another team in 2025? Or will he retire? The weather report for the game, 35 degrees is the projected temperature at kickoff. And I bring that up because the narrative of the Dolphins, they can't win in cold weather games. I think that if Tua plays in this game, I think the Dolphins, they have a chance to win, but I think it's going to be one of those 12-10 type of games like it was a few years ago for the Dolphins just to get into the playoffs in the final week of the season But Tyler Huntley, he managed the game pretty well against the Browns. But if Tua doesn't play, I'm going to pick the Jets. But if Tua does play, I think the Dolphins, they finally win a cold weather game, but it'll be a ridiculously low scoring game. Chiefs and Broncos. The Chiefs have clinched the number one seed in the AFC and will be resting their starters. While the Broncos, the task is simple: win and you're in. And this is ultimately the perfect test for this Broncos team. In years past, we have seen the Broncos play the Chiefs close more often than not. And if the Chiefs somehow win this game against the Broncos, while the Chiefs are playing their second and third string players, then the Broncos, truth be told, they wouldn't belong in the playoffs at that point. I'm going to pick the Broncos to win this game because the Broncos, they know that this is a playoff game to them. Win, and you're going to the big show. Lose, and it kind of shows maybe you don't belong anyway if you can't win against the Chiefs' second and third string players. The Broncos, I think they win this game, and they will stamp their ticket to the playoffs. Vikings and Lions Sunday Night Football to not only conclude Week 18, but the regular season. Not only is the NFC North on the line, but the number one seed in the NFC. In the first matchup between these two teams earlier in the season, it was one of the best games of the regular season. Both teams surrendered double-digit leads, and the game was won by the Lions with a game-winning field goal by Jake Bates to hand the Vikings their first loss of the season. And then the Vikings lost the next week against the Rams on Thursday Night Football, and the Vikings haven't lost ever since. The Lions, their only two losses of the year against the Buccaneers in Week 2 and against the Bills. So these two teams, knowing what's on the line, I think this could be the game of the regular season, the best game that we've seen all regular season long. And despite being 14-2, I still think a lot of people aren't giving the Vikings the respect they deserve. I was worried at first for Sam Darnold, as we saw a few years ago. He had a great start with the Panthers, but then things started to fall apart. But the Vikings is the perfect fit for Sam Darnold, and he should be comeback player of the year in my opinion. And I'm going to, in a very close game from start to finish, and what I think is going to be the best game of the regular season, I'm going to pick the Lions. The home crowd's going to be shouting the entire game. They're going to be on their feet, screaming and encouraging the defense. As the Lions, they experienced their heartbreak last season. They got their revenge against the 49ers last week. And the Lions, I do think they prevail, and they will get the number one seed in the NFC playoffs. And that will do it for my Week 18 NFL predictions. Comment your predictions down below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Have a great new year. Until next time, Vegas is always watching.